She walked into the base like any civilian would. Jeans, a plain shirt, and a quiet smile. No one paid her much attention, until one of the SEALs caught sight of the ink on her forearm. His eyes widened. Suddenly, the room fell silent. What kind of tattoo could make hardened Navy SEALs stop in their tracks? It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon on base. The kind of day where the hum of helicopters in the distance and the rhythm of boots on gravel blended into a background noise that nobody even noticed anymore. The Navy SEALs inside the briefing hall were still shaking off the last mission. Tired, focused, but alert in the way only operators could be. That's when she walked in. She didn't belong there, not at first glance. Civilian clothes, faded jeans, a plain white shirt, hair tied back in the simplest way possible. She wasn't carrying herself with the stiffness of military posture, nor the sharp-eyed intensity of intelligence officers. She looked, for all intents and purposes, like any visitor, maybe someone's sister, a contractor, or a friend of the unit commander. And yet, the silence that followed her entry was almost unnatural. A couple of men exchanged quick glances. One leaned back in his chair, frowning, as if his instincts had just tripped some silent alarm. The SEALs were trained to spot anomalies, to detect the little things others ignored. And this woman, despite her ordinary appearance, radiated something unspoken. Calmness. A weight, almost like she belonged there, though no one could explain why. At first, the operators went back to their business. They assumed she was part of the logistics team, or maybe medical support. After all, civilians were not uncommon around the base. But then she sat down at the back of the room, casually folding her arms across the table. That's when one of the men noticed it. A glimpse of ink, just a flash, peeking out from beneath the rolled sleeve of her shirt. At first, it seemed like nothing unusual. Plenty of people had tattoos. But when the SEAL caught a clearer view, his entire expression changed. His eyes narrowed, then widened. His jaw tightened, like he was staring at a ghost. He wasn't the only one. Another man across the table followed his line of sight. Then another. Within seconds, an almost electric tension rippled across the room. Conversation died down. The scraping of chairs against the floor seemed louder in the silence. Every pair of eyes slowly, deliberately, turned toward her. She didn't flinch. If she noticed the sudden shift in attention, she didn't show it. Instead, she calmly reached for her water bottle, took a sip and leaned back. The ink on her arm now fully visible under the fluorescent light. And that's when the unspoken question filled the air. What is a civilian doing with that tattoo? Because to these men who had seen symbols, patches, and markings from every corner of the special operations world, that ink wasn't random. It wasn't decorative. It meant something. Something only those who had bled, trained, and sacrificed in silence could ever truly understand. The kind of tattoo no ordinary civilian could ever carry. The tattoo wasn't large, but it didn't need to be. A series of lines, arcs, and a single emblem sat etched just below her elbow. At first glance, it could have passed for a tribal design, something stylish, something casual. But to those who had served in the shadows, it was unmistakable. It was a mark that had never been advertised, never inked in a shop for trend seekers. It wasn't supposed to exist outside a very specific brotherhood. And yet, here it was, clear, deliberate, on the arm of a woman who looked like she had no connection to their world. The room shifted. One SEAL leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on her arm like he was piecing together a memory. Another tilted his head slightly, the way men did when something didn't make sense, but demanded answers. Even the commander at the front of the room paused mid-sentence, following the line of sight of his men. There was no mistaking it. That tattoo belonged to a program most civilians had never heard of. A classified initiative whispered only in debrief rooms and war stories. A network of operators who had been pulled from the shadows for missions too sensitive to ever make headlines. But here's the thing. No one in that room had ever heard of a woman carrying it. One of the younger SEALs, fresh from his first deployment, muttered under his breath, "That's impossible." He had only heard rumors about the emblem, passed down from older teammates, half-believed stories told after midnight. The kind of stories where you couldn't tell if the speaker was exaggerating or if he was holding back the details that mattered. The older operators knew better. They knew the tattoo wasn't just a decoration. It was a bond. A silent badge of missions that had no official record. Operations buried under layers of secrecy. You didn't earn it in training. You didn't get it for serving time. You carried it only if you'd been there. And if she had it, the men didn't speak openly, but their body language told the story. Shoulders tensed. Posture shifted. The room's energy had transformed from casual indifference to something sharper. Heavier. The kind of energy that said, "This woman isn't who we thought she was." Finally, one of the senior operators broke the silence. His voice was low, steady, the kind that carried weight without volume. "Ma'am, where did you get that ink?" Her eyes met his, calm, unwavering. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. Not mocking, not playful, but something else entirely. The kind of smile that comes from holding a truth bigger than the question itself. She didn't answer right away. She let the silence hang, stretching it thin until it pressed on every chest in the room. Then, slowly, she rested her forearm on the table, letting the tattoo sit in plain sight. "I didn't get it," she said evenly. "I earned it." The words landed like a hammer. The SEALs exchanged glances. The younger ones looked confused, searching the faces of their seniors for context. The older ones knew enough to stay quiet, because whoever she was, she had just shifted the balance of that room. Her words, "I earned it," echoed like a slow detonation through the room. For a moment, even the air seemed to pause. The SEALs stared at her with the same kind of intensity they usually reserved for enemy targets. But she didn't flinch. She let the weight of her statement settle, like she'd said it before and knew exactly how it would land. The commander stood now, not in aggression, but with the quiet authority of a man who had seen too much to dismiss what stood in front of him. His voice carried the kind of calm that comes before storms. "Explain," he said. Her gaze didn't waver. "You already know what it means," she replied. "And if you don't, then maybe you're not cleared to." That answer set a fire across the room. Some of the younger SEALs shifted in disbelief. No one talked to their commander like that. But the older ones, they caught the nuance. They knew this wasn't arrogance. This was someone who had operated in the kind of silence they all understood, but rarely admitted. Finally, she leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. Her tone softened, but her words cut sharp. "That tattoo isn't about bravado. It isn't about rank. It's about missions that don't make the news. Missions that don't exist on paper. When things went so far south that the country couldn't afford to admit it happened, they sent people like me." The room went utterly still. One SEAL muttered, "Ghost teams." Under his breath, the term was unofficial, almost myth, whispered among operators late at night when stories veered into the unbelievable. Ghost teams were said to be groups pulled from various branches, stitched together for one purpose: to go where others couldn't, and to disappear when the job was done. Most didn't believe they were real. Until now. She gave a faint nod, as if acknowledging his whisper without confirming it outright. "You think you've seen everything in war," she said quietly. "But there are battles you'll never read about. Places where the wrong flag couldn't be raised, and the wrong uniform couldn't be seen. That's where I was. That's why I carry this mark." The SEALs sat frozen, caught between skepticism and the undeniable gravity in her voice. Nobody could fake that calm. Nobody could fabricate that kind of conviction. One of the men finally asked, almost reluctantly, "So why here? Why now?" She looked around the room, at each face, each hardened expression. Then her eyes settled back on the commander. "Because the mission you're preparing for," she said slowly, deliberately, "I've already been there." The silence that followed wasn't just shock. It was realization. The kind that crept under the skin and stayed there. She wasn't a civilian. She wasn't a visitor. She was a ghost from the same war they thought they had already fought. And whatever came next, they were about to learn that the tattoo on her arm wasn't just history. It was a warning.